May 1945. The war ends, and the full horror of Nazi Germany is laid bare. Across Europe, Allied soldiers enter concentration camps and find scenes that defy comprehension. They find piles of bodies, gas chambers, and thousands of skeletal survivors, barely clinging to life. The question of what to do with these places becomes one of the most difficult challenges of the post-war world. Some camps are burned, some are reused, others are left to slowly disappear, and a few are preserved, standing to this day as warnings the world has never been able to forget. In early 1945, as Allied forces advanced from east and west, they began uncovering the Nazi concentration camp system. The Soviets arrived first. On July 23, 1944, the Red Army reached Majdanek, near Lublin in eastern Poland. The speed of the advance caught the Germans off guard, and much of the camp remained intact, including its gas chambers. 6 months later, on the 27th of January 1945, Soviet troops liberated Auschwitz. By then, the SS had already evacuated most of the population on death marches westward. Around 7,000 survivors remained, most too sick to move. The Soviets found warehouses filled with the belongings of the dead, shoes, suitcases, eyeglasses, and over 7,000 kilograms of human hair bagged and ready for shipment. As the Western Allies pushed into Germany that spring, their liberations revealed camp after camp. On the 11th of April, the American 6th Armored Division reached Buchenwald and found over 21,000 prisoners still alive, many barely so. On the 15th of April, British forces entered Bergen-Belsen. Inside, some 60,000 starving and mortally ill prisoners were packed into barracks without food or water. Thousands of unburied bodies lay across the grounds. Typhus was rampant. On the 29th of April, American soldiers reached Dachau. Outside the gates, they found a train of boxcars filled with decomposing bodies. Inside, 30,000 emaciated survivors waited. General Dwight Eisenhower ordered that the atrocities be documented in detail, sensing that one day people would try to deny they ever happened. Liberation did not mean immediate relief. Many survivors were too weak to eat solid food. In Bergen-Belsen alone, over 13,000 people died in the weeks following liberation from disease and the long-term effects of starvation. Typhus continued to kill even after Allied medical teams arrived. The British Army made a drastic decision at Bergen-Belsen. The barracks were so contaminated that they ordered the entire prisoner camp burned to the ground. Flamethrowers and bulldozers cleared the site to contain the epidemic. Survivors were relocated to a nearby former Wehrmacht facility. The original camp buildings no longer exist. Before retreating, the SS had attempted to destroy many camps. At Auschwitz, the Germans blew up the crematoria and burned documents. At the Operation Reinhard death camps, Treblinka, Sobibór, and Bełżec, the Nazis had dismantled the camps as early as 1943, plowing the ground, planting trees, and even building a farmhouse on the Treblinka site to disguise what had happened. Nearly 1.7 million people had been murdered at those 3 camps, yet the physical evidence was deliberately erased. Allied commanders understood the urgency of preserving what remained. In the American zone, local German civilians were forced to tour the camps and witness the conditions firsthand. Members of Congress and journalists were invited to visit. Photographs, film footage, and written testimonies gathered during this period became critical evidence at the Nuremberg trials. Rather than being demolished, several former concentration camps were repurposed almost immediately. The post-war refugee crisis in Europe was enormous. By the spring of 1945, approximately 8 million people had been displaced. Over 1 million remained without homes or countries to return to. Around 250,000 of these were Jewish survivors. Displaced persons camps were established across Germany, Austria, and Italy. Some were located on or near the sites of former concentration camps. Bergen-Belsen became one of the largest Jewish displaced persons camps in Germany, operating from the summer of 1945 until September 1950. Survivors insisted on keeping the name. At its peak, the camp housed over 11,000 Jewish residents. Schools were established, newspapers printed, and democratic elections held. The birth rate in the displaced persons camps was among the highest in the world, as survivors rebuilt the families that had been destroyed. At Dachau, the Allies used the facility between 1945 and 1948 to imprison accused war criminals and former SS members. After that, because of the refugee crisis caused by the expulsion of ethnic Germans from Eastern Europe, the site housed roughly 2,000 German refugees from Czechoslovakia. This settlement remained until the mid-1960s. In the Soviet occupation zone, the reuse of camps took a darker turn. The Soviet secret police converted several former Nazi concentration camps into special camps for political prisoners. Sachsenhausen became Soviet Special Camp No. 7. Between 1945 and 1950, approximately 60,000 people were imprisoned there, including former Nazi functionaries, political dissidents, and individuals convicted after forced confessions. Over 12,000 died from hunger and disease. The camps were sealed from the outside world, earning them the name silence camps. Buchenwald followed a similar path as Special Camp No. 2. Roughly 28,000 were imprisoned there, and over 7,000 died. The existence of these Soviet camps was hidden from the public until after German reunification in 1990, when mass graves were discovered and investigated. Not all camps survived the post-war years. The Operation Reinhard camps, Treblinka, Sobibór, and Bełżec, had been razed by the Nazis during the war. By the time investigators reached these sites, there were few visible structures left. At Treblinka, a farmhouse stood where nearly 900,000 people had been murdered. Formal memorials did not appear until the 1960s. At Bełżec, where approximately 435,000 Jews were killed, a proper memorial was not completed until 2004. Across Germany and Austria, hundreds of subcamps simply vanished. Many had been built near factories, and after the war, the buildings were dismantled or absorbed into expanding towns. Local communities often preferred to forget. At Bergen-Belsen, the original camp had been burned. A memorial was unveiled in 1952, but a proper exhibition did not open until 1966. Research and educational programs did not begin in earnest until the 1980s. Even at Auschwitz, locals dismantled wooden barracks at Birkenau after liberation, repurposing the lumber as building materials. What remains today exists only because of deliberate preservation efforts that began within 2 years of the war's end. The transformation of former camps into memorials happened unevenly and often slowly. Poland moved first. On the 14th of June 1947, the first exhibition opened at Auschwitz, organized by former prisoners. Approximately 50,000 people attended the opening ceremony. The following month, the Polish parliament formally established the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum. In 1979, UNESCO designated it a World Heritage Site. In Germany, progress was slower. East Germany opened memorials at Buchenwald in 1958 and Sachsenhausen in 1961, but framed them primarily as sites of anti-fascist resistance. The specific persecution of Jews, Roma, and other targeted groups was downplayed, and the history of the Soviet special camps was entirely suppressed. In West Germany, Dachau's memorial opened in 1965, driven largely by former prisoners. The original barracks had deteriorated and were torn down. 2 were rebuilt for the exhibition. The remaining 30 are marked by low concrete curbs filled with gravel. After German reunification, a reckoning with the full history began. The Soviet-era narratives were revised. New exhibitions documented the post-war camps. Mass graves were excavated and memorialized. These sites now carry a layered history, bearing witness to both Nazi crimes and Soviet repression. In Austria, the Mauthausen Memorial preserves the quarry where prisoners were forced to carry heavy stones up the infamous stairs of death. Beyond Europe, Holocaust museums expanded globally. Yad Vashem in Jerusalem became the central institution for remembrance. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum opened in Washington in 1993. Today, hundreds of museums and memorial sites exist across every continent. What survives today is a fraction of the vast system the Nazis built. There were more than 44,000 camps, ghettos, and incarceration sites across occupied Europe. Only a handful are preserved. The death camps of Treblinka, Sobibór, and Bełżec are quiet fields marked by monuments. Auschwitz-Birkenau draws over 2 million visitors each year. Dachau, Sachsenhausen, Buchenwald, and Bergen-Belsen each carry their own exhibitions. But most of the subcamps have disappeared entirely, absorbed into the modern landscape, Recent archaeological work has begun to recover what was lost. At Treblinka and Sobibór, researchers using ground-penetrating radar have uncovered foundations of gas chambers and personal belongings of victims. These findings add new physical evidence to a history that some would prefer to forget. What remains, whether preserved behind glass or buried beneath quiet fields, stands as a reminder that even the most systematic attempt to erase evidence cannot fully succeed, and that the post-war world's response to these places shaped how future generations would understand the darkest chapter of the 20th century. If you found this video insightful, like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more After History. Thanks for watching.